Kelvin is reincarnated in a new world. He has no memories of his previous life. That is because, as part of the contract to reincarnate here, he chose to forget them. A voice named Melfina has Kelvin choose his opening skills and all. Then, as he heads to the town of Parth, she explains that the god who got him killed frantically came to her for help. Melfina is the goddess of reincarnation, and she agreed to let Kelvin get reincarnated. He fell in love with her at first sight and wanted her to accompany him in this new world. She agreed since she wanted to take a vacation. Another reason his previous self forgot his memories was to add more skill points. So he thinks he can sacrifice his memories because he'll fall for her all over again. She was so charmed, she went along with this plan. Kelvin registers himself at the guild as Melfina warns him not to put his occupation as summoner, as it is highly sought by many. So he writes down Green Mage instead. He is then told about the ranking system and takes up a quest for his level. His first job is to kill 3 slimes. As a summoner, Melfina tells him how to tame a familiar. He tries to get a slime to submit, but it looks like he needs more than guts to tame this little blue thing. Eventually, Kelvin is successful and calls it Clotho. They continue killing other slimes. Melfina points out that Kelvin is the only S-rank summoner around. This is why his familiars rank up faster, so he needs to keep a low profile. On his way back after getting paid, he stumbles into an alley where a slave trader is selling elven slaves. There is not much he can do now. He goes to rent a cheap inn for his level and then has his first meal. Melfina hopes he will level up enough so that she can materialize in this world and experience its wonderfulness. Kelvin has ranked up so fast that other adventurers are getting suspicious. Since he's going to take a higher ranking job, Cashel hopes Kelvin will join his team for this next job. Everyone is whispering that Cashel is just trying to lead Kelvin and crush his hopes. Nobody in this guild is big enough to stand up to him. Kelvin declines his offer, but instead suggests a competition to see who can defeat the Dark Knight first. Kelvin also claims he will go solo and allow Cashel to use his party members for this job. When Cashel and his members enter the ruins of a castle, they are shocked to see that Kelvin has already defeated all the undead. Kelvin then challenges them as he accuses them of wanting to take him out. The rest think their cover is blown since they have bounties on their heads. Kelvin is unaware of all that. Raj charges straight, but gets trapped in his mud trap. Gimel escapes, knowing Kelvin is bad news, but Clotho, who is now evolved into some huge slime gluttonia, knocks him out. Cashel tries to fight Kelvin, but easily gets owned. Kelvin realizes they leveled up so fast and have high stats because they defeated adventurers instead of monsters. With the trio tied up, Kelvin goes to face the Dark Knight, Gerard. After analyzing his great power, Kelvin changes his mind and wants him to join his party. Gerard is a pretty nice guy, but he can't stop talking. The country and king whom he served are long gone, so he wants to see if Kelvin has what it takes to be his new king. They fight, and Kelvin has to pull out all the stops just to be on par with him. When Kelvin seemingly corners Gerard, that is when the latter remembers his past life. Serving that kingdom of Alcarl, one day an elf came to his king and wanted this nation to serve his Lysia empire to fight against the holy empire of Durames. The king refused, and a curse was put on Alcarl. Within a few days, everyone dropped dead, even Gerard's wife. He tried to get his daughter to run away, but she too died. Hence, Gerard remembers his lingering regret as vengeance. He wants Kelvin to help him out with his revenge. Kelvin then defeats him. Back at the guild, everyone is cheering for Kelvin for defeating the Dark Knight, and Cashel is no longer around to boss them around. They have been locked up and will be interrogated for their crimes. Gerard is now Kelvin's servant. Kelvin meets Leo, who is a guild master. However, Leo has top-notch appraising skills, so he can tell Kelvin is from another world and a summoner. As Kelvin worries about this, his familiars tell him to be frank about it and to make friends so he can share his secret. Kelvin admits to Leo about it, but wonders why he didn't take action against Cashel if he could see his true status. Cashel is a noble from a military nation. He couldn't move unnecessarily, and he was trying to gather evidence. Just as he got them, Kelvin got Cashel first. Getting down to business, Leo says that there were also many summoned heroes here. Heroes are summoned since the Demon King is about to be revived. However, he wants Kelvin to protect him instead of the heroes. Because there are not many high-ranking adventurers, when the Demon King revives, he wants those heroes to concentrate on defeating him. Leo believes Kelvin is hiding his identity because he does not want to get involved in power struggles between nobles. He promises true freedom if he helps him, and, of course, makes him rise to the top before someone else forces Kelvin to join their cause. Since the terms are favorable, Kelvin agrees. The next day, Kelvin decides to go buy a slave. He needs someone who can support him from the rear. At the slave trading area, he notices a half-elf. However, she has a curse that burns anyone who touches her. This is the one he wants since she also fits all his fighting prerequisites. The slave trader is shocked when Kelvin wants to buy her. Now Kelvin owns her. Ethel is glad for her freedom, although she has few memories of her past or her parents. She is still worried about her curse, but as expected, Kelvin learned some ultimate blessing skills, and just like that, Ethel's curse is lifted. So happy, she cried. Back at the inn, Claire, the innkeeper, dresses her up as a maid for some fan service. Later, Kelvin introduces the rest of his familiars and teaches her how to use skill points and all. Because there are no extra rooms available, she sleeps in the same bed with him. Kelvin can't sleep the whole night. Ever since Ethel joined, everyone has been leveling up and increasing their skill set. Ange, the guild's receptionist, takes Kelvin and Ethel out to a sweet cafe. Free show for everybody, as they think the girls are fighting over him as they are just trying to feed him. This is ruined when a royal ruffian comes to interrupt. He is Prince Tabra of the neighboring military kingdom of Trison. He wants the girls for himself, so Kelvin easily knocks out his guards and makes him reveal his intentions here. He is here to see Leo after hearing rumors of a very strong adventurer. Because only the strong can rule his kingdom. Tabra is so weak, so he thinks of making that adventurer work under him to score some points. Kelvin knows that the adventurer is himself, so he refuses that. Meanwhile, Melfiner returns shortly to see the priestess, Colette. She sensed an evil presence on the western continent and wanted Colette to send the heroes there and also keep them away from Parth. Back at the inn, Ethel is trying to make out with Kelvin because she loves him and all, with just petting her, but this makes him think he needs to get a house. When Melfiner returns, she shows the rest the heroes she summoned a year ago. Shockingly, their level is quite low, unlike those who have leveled up considerably. Leo then summons Kelvin. Adventurers found a secret room that is said to contain a sealed demon. He isn't so sure until Leo brings up the case of a certain guy roughing up Tabra, which could risk war between the countries. Kelvin will take up this job. As they make their way to that secret room, they see a chained woman in the center. Then the archdemon, Victor, introduces himself and this woman, Syrah, who is the demon lord's daughter. Victor purposely let adventurers discover this room so as to spread the word. Only humans can break Syrah's seal. He wants to eat Kelvin's power since his power allows him to eat and steal those he devours. Then, once he frees Syrah, he will devour Syrah, who has a great deal of power, and install himself as the next demon lord. Kelvin isn't flinching. In fact, he is so happy to fight a strong opponent. Victor summons a few undead. But it's all children's play for Kelvin and others. When they're done with that, it's time to face off with Victor. Victor complements the two's skills, and then uses a smoke bomb to conceal his presence and launch a sneak attack. However, Kelvin could sense his presence and alert Gerard, who immediately counterattacked. Despite this, Victor overwhelms Gerard and directs his attention to Kelvin, who has Clotho use magic absorption on him, and then casts Glory's Sanction. The attack binds Victor's left arm, but it's not enough to hold him. Hence, Kelvin casts Vortex Edge to enchant Gerard's sword. As Gerard goes to attack Victor, the demon tries to launch a sneak attack against Kelvin, who had Ethel reveal herself and shoot her blaze arrow at Victor. With Victor's right arm charred beyond use, Gerard then slices off his left arm. Although pleased by this outcome, Kelvin has the group fall back as his Glory's Sanction just expired. Victor compliments the group for doing the second most significant damage ever done to him and blames losing his edge in the peace of that era. Victor casts Jin Scrimmage on himself. To prevent the spell from finishing being cast, Kelvin, Ethel, and Gerard each cast a spell or use a skill against Victor, but they're too late. Kelvin then has Gerard use his loyalty skill to max power. Once Victor lunges at the group, Kelvin casts Earthen Rampart to block him, but he breaks through it, forcing Gerard to use his shield as a last resort defense. Victor then manages to get the upper hand on Gerard, but before he can attack him any further, Ethel distracts Victor's attention with some arrows. It allows Gerard to launch a counterattack against Victor, who is then overwhelmed by Clotho spitting out all of the failed weapons Kelvin created at him. A trifecta attack launched by Kelvin, Ethel, and Clotho causes Victor to be slammed against a wall and for rubble from a pillar to topple over towards Syrah Ball. Quickly, Victor catches and moves the piece of rubble that would have crushed Syrah, moves it to the side, and faints on his back while conceding defeat. Kelvin then calls out Victor's lie to eat Syrah, to which he answers that if he didn't lie, Kelvin's party wouldn't have fought as hard as they did against him. To his admission, Gustav entrusted Victor with protecting Syrah as her caretaker. A flashback shows Victor's past as the caretaker for Syrah. In it, Victor is shown training Syrah in magical pugilism. Eventually, the hero's party attacked the Demon King's castle. Although King Gustav's life was in danger, he put a seal on Syrah that only a human could break and sent her to a faraway place where she'd be safe. When Victor finally found Syrah, he'd protect her and wait for the hero to be long since dead, and for an era of peace to revive her so she could become the next Demon King. Before he dies, Victor asks that Syrah join Kelvin's party. Kelvin then breaks the seal on Syrah, and when she awakens, she tearfully curses Victor and her father for their selfishness. Outside, the party is met by Erd, who has shown proof of the subjugation of the demon in the dungeon. Erd accepts the item, but asks who the Lady Kelvin was carrying on his back, and Kelvin answers that it was someone the demon possessed. In truth, it was Syrah wearing a camouflage hairpin to hide her wings and horns. Afterward, Kelvin evolves Gerard into an Abyssal Knight Commander. After Kelvin has a brief conversation with Syrah, he and his party take Syrah to Parth and show her around a bit. Later, Kelvin reports to the Adventurers Guild about successfully subjugating the demon in the dungeon, which elevates him to rank in the guild. The receptionists and other guild members would celebrate this accomplishment back at the inn. Sometime after the party, Syrah notes how exciting the outside world is and remembers a memory of her with Victor. Kelvin's party has more goodies and power-ups. Suddenly, he has this craving for rice and wants to eat it. Hence a journey to the country of Toraj, where rice is abundantly grown. This is also part of Kelvin keeping his promise to Victor to let Syrah see the world. Along the way, they stumble into bandits known as Black Wind. They are an infamous name, but as we all know, their power and level are nothing compared to Kelvin's party, and so Kelvin sends Syrah to deal with them. She cannot use her weapons. Black Wind will be in for some torrid time as Syrah easily defeats them with her bare hands. And this is just her holding back a lot. After the bandits are captured, they claim their boss is even more powerful. Now this piques Kelvin's interest. At Toraj, they meet the guildmaster, Mist. There is a bit of history behind Black Wind, but they were brought down by Trison's hero, Kristoff. However, the hero now becomes the boss of Black Wind and has recently engaged in human trafficking. They have to be careful in dealing with this matter, or there will be a war between both nations. While Kelvin isn't particularly hyped since Kristoff's level is low for his standards, suddenly he has a devilish idea. A group of heroes led by Toya Kanzaki has arrived in Toraj. Kelvin will have them work for them. So when Toya and his party members see Mist and are told about the situation, Toya quickly jumps into this mission. Originally, they were sent by Melfina to find a boat to the Empire of Rycia in the west. Meanwhile, a Black Wind guy is about to assault one of the young girls, just in time for Kelvin to barge in and beat him up. Just like that, the slaves are saved. Meanwhile, Prisra is talking to Kristoff and is not happy with the way things are going. From what I can see, they are doing an undercover mission for Trison, but at this rate, they might get abandoned. Kelvin then barges in to fight him. However, he isn't interested in him, and this is just a stepping stone for the next big fight. Toya's party enters the hideout and is baffled to find the slaves are okay and the bandits have been taken out. One of the slaves claims their savior is fighting the remnants and might not stand a chance. Toya quickly rushes there and sees Kristoff and others down. He thinks he is too late, and Kelvin is the Black Wind boss. The heroes of Daramis confront Kelvin's group and accuse them of being the Black Wind. Kelvin plays along with the accusation and boasts how vulnerable Gilda's group was. Unnerved by Kelvin's audacity, the heroes of Daramis individually introduce themselves, and Toya proclaims justice will be served against them. Hearing this declaration makes Kelvin laugh and mock them, claiming they're too weak. But he proposes a game where he'll face off against them all, and the winner has their wish fulfilled. Although Toya insists on fighting him alone, Setsuna admonishes him from that, noting Kelvin is hiding something. So with his whole team's support, Toya agrees to Kelvin's terms. Afterward, they change their location to a more open area, and Ethel reveals that Kelvin planned that if he won, he'd have the heroes testify against Kristoff and his gang. Sarah mentions her desire to fight, but Kelvin downplays it and then has Ethel serve sandwiches the group can enjoy while they watch him fight. However, Ethel also notes her concern that Kelvin is taking a massive risk fighting the heroes by himself, but he claims it's a matter of improving his weakness against fighting in groups. Furthermore, he'll try out his newest trinket, the Skill Eater. On the opposite side, Toya chastises Kelvin, believing he's the Black Wind bandit group with a string of nefarious deeds under their belt. Wasting no time, the heroes call upon their individual fairies' blessings, and Toya starts the attack against Kelvin. Complimenting Toya's deduction of how advantageous it'd be to attack him from up close, Kelvin then casts Radiant Lances against them, forcing Toya and Setsuna to block the attacks. Nana then calls out the tamed monster named Money from her bag to use Fire Breath against Kelvin, and he briskly dodges the attack. He then uses his Skill Eater on Miyabi, while Gerard comments that the trinket was created from Victor's armor. Sarah also details the Skill Eater's skill copying abilities. Kelvin then claims that he stole Miyabi's parallel thinking, causing Toya to attack Kelvin as Setsuna and Nana tend to the incapacitated Miyabi. The agitated Toya attacks Kelvin in close proximity to prevent him from casting any spells. However, Kelvin manages to hold Toya off with a single hand, utilizing Sarah's borrowed rank martial arts skill. Setsuna intervenes, so Kelvin casts Adamant Rampart, creating a stone blockade from the ground. However, Setsuna manages to slice right through it. Appearing from behind the falling rubble, Kelvin casts a giant fireball aimed at Setsuna, but Toya blocks it with his sword. Despite Toya brushing off the attack as nothing special and reciting his determination to defeat the Demon King, Setsuna slaps him and tearfully claims to be more mindful. A brief flashback of when the heroes of Daramis arrived in the alternate world is shown, with Setsuna giving commentary about it. Setsuna pleads with Toya to rely on them more as a team. Toya then apologizes for his past discretion toward the group. Once that was all settled, the fight continued when a light fairy blinded Kelvin, which he notes can't be detected through his detection skill. Nana and Miyabi both use ice and dark magic to immobilize Kelvin's movement, and Toya and Setsuna try to attack Kelvin, but he counterattacks with a cleft detonation spell. After curing himself of his blindness, Kelvin compliments the group for their efforts thus far. He goes on to advise the heroes of their inadequate combat techniques. Enraged by Toya's advice, the heroes entrap and restrain Kelvin in what appears to be a disadvantageous situation. However, Kelvin summons his adamantine guardians and utilizes the parallel thinking he stole, creating a new spell, Radiant Crossfire. Using that spell frees Kelvin from his restraints and, one by one, takes out the hero party. Afterward, Toya awakens and is fully explained the truth of who Kelvin and his group are. Toya then formally apologizes to Kelvin after he learns everything, and Kelvin promises not to hold anything against him so long as he follows up with his side of the bargain. After parting ways with the slave, Mist thanks Kelvin, and from now on they will take it from here to interrogate Kristoff and the other Black Wind members. Kelvin returns to the rest, so everyone is in their swimsuits because they're going to be the same S-rank monsters. This is also partly to help teach and guide the Daramis heroes to do better. Kelvin learns how they were summoned by Colette and then asks how he is going to deal with the S-rank monster. Toya's obvious answer is to run, since he is not strong enough to deal with it, but others may die. But his comrades' safety comes first. He may gain an unfavorable reputation from it, but he promises to become stronger, and then he will win. Kelvin accepts that answer and then goes to destroy the monster. Soon, both sides part ways as Toya's party sails across the sea, which was their original mission to begin with. Kelvin gives them some stat boost pendants. Kelvin then remembers Lysia lying across the continent and asks, if they pick a fight with them, can they win? Gerard never thought it was possible, but now that he has friends and has leveled up, it is. Then they have an audience with Torage's empress, Tsubaki Fujiwara. For their achievements, she will grant anything, but Kelvin only wants their rice. Not money, land, fame, or status because they enjoy their freedom. Tsubaki is willing to give as much rice as they want for free and for life. Kelvin enjoys his Japanese cuisine. Tsubaki tries to flirt with him and convince him to work for her. But he sees Ethil's scary face, so he has to decline and says they have to return to Parth. But they don't have to walk all the way back, as Tsubaki opens a teleport gate for them. Kelvin doesn't know about it because that sly Leo never told him. Back home, Kelvin decides to buy a house. With a new place to call home, the mother and daughter slaves they saved, Ellie and Luca, are now working as their servants. That night, Melfiner returns. It has been a while, but it looks like she has finally gotten a physical form. Melfina enjoys food prepared by Ethil and then complains about how hard it was to find Kelvin. Gerard then chimes in and asks who Melfina is, so Melfina formally introduces herself to everyone there. Later in the living room, Melfina asks to be called Mel instead of her full name to avoid any conflict with Duramis, and then bestows Kelvin a blessing that has a couple of effects. The first effect is that it prevents him from receiving a fatal wound once a month. The second is the ability to summon heroes. Afterward, Syrah and Mel spar against each other as Luca and Gerard observe the fight. Outside the mansion, Kelvin contemplates whether or not the heroes of Duramis made it to the western continent and about his new hero summoning ability. Once Syrah and Mel finish their spar, they retire to the bath area, where Ethel offers her services to them. They then discuss Kelvin's current aloof and contemplative nature, and Mel thinks it's about his hero's summoning ability. Later, Mel meets Kelvin in the backyard, and he asks her about the importance of heroes. Before she answers the question, Mel talks about the Demon King first, and all Demon Kings possess a unique skill called Papilla. It's a skill with two abilities. The first ability multiplies the evil within its user, and the second is the nullification of all damage. That's where the heroes come in, as their nature is fundamentally different from those in that world. Although Kelvin could quickly acclimate to the world with his amnesia, he worries for the heroes of Duramis. Noting that Kelvin is anxious about the hero summoning process, Mel suggests that he perform a reincarnation summon and explains the two different summoning techniques. That night, Kelvin decides to summon a hero through a reincarnation summoning process. Recalling all of his tamed creatures, Kelvin drinks a recovery potion given to him by Ethel and, after drinking it, is guided through the reincarnation summoning process by Mel. Once Kelvin commences the process, the summoned person starts picking their skills, abilities, age, and appearance. When they're finished, they appear in the summoning circle that Kelvin created. The hero summoned was named Rio, and she tearfully thanked Kelvin for summoning her. Rio then collapsed due to exhaustion from her reincarnation, and moments later, as does Kelvin, for using up all of his magic. Afterward, Rio wakes up in her own room and immediately heads outside to take in the area. Rio was then joined by Kelvin, who told her that he was also reincarnated into that world. Kelvin then explains his time in that world thus far. In turn, Rio explains her backstory to Kelvin as a sickly individual whose only escape was through books and how grateful she is now in the new world. Furthermore, Rio asks to join his adventure party, and Kelvin accepts the offer but asks that she consider him a step-sibling from a different land. Rio happily agrees to the request and decides to call Kelvin Brother Kel, and Kelvin is allowed to call Rio Rion. Soon, Kelvin takes everyone to the forest, even his servants. He wants them, including Rion, to level up. Syrah, Gerard, and Clotho will be fighting the monsters. Then they'll share their XP with them. A stray wolf attacks, so Kelvin impresses his party by subduing it easily. Now it is domesticated, as is their pet, Alex. Also in this forest are Erd and his party. They are here to kill monsters as a test to get promoted. They are really jealous that Kelvin has hot chicks with him, and that demoralized them for the test. But even if they got over that, There are no monsters left to kill because Syrah and Gerard killed them all. Back home, Rion trains under Gerard and Syrah and is progressing well. Due to her skill set, she is able to communicate with Alex. One night, shady people surrounded their house. It turns out they are from Trison, and they want revenge. Seeing that they are so low level, Kelvin has Rion show the fruits of her training. Kelvin faces off with the group's boss before he can escape. He lucked out. Meanwhile, in Trison, Emperor Zell has a meeting with his children, who are also high-ranking generals, Asgrad and Shodora. Also in this meeting are Generals Dan Dalba and Tristan Faze. Dan is upset with Tristan that his blunder has caused the nations of Toraj, Daramis, and Gon to form an alliance against them. This risks war, but Tristan dares them to bring it on. While everyone is enjoying peace and turning soft, Trison has been building their military. As it is Trison's goal to conquer and unite the continent, Shodora doesn't think now is the right time. Asgrad is in favor of war, as he wants to test his new dragons. With Dan against this, the score is tied. It all goes down to Clive Therese, but he is absent. Dan sends his son, Jin, to get him. Is he interrupting because Clive just shagged his entire female knight platoon? Leo tells Kelvin that Trison has been spotted doing sneaky activities at several kingdoms' borders. There are a few skirmishes here and there, but nothing major. It could be that they are doing recon or acquiring slaves. Because there might be political changes in Trison, war cannot be ruled out. Leo gives Kelvin a letter from King Leonhart, who is the Beast King of Gon. He has personally requested to meet Kelvin, and this will also serve as his S-rank exam. As they make their way there, they are ambushed by several elves. The elven chief, Nelraz, realizes who they are and apologizes. He has also been told by Leonhart about this. When he sees Ethel, he is shocked that Lumil is still alive. So before they get down to business, Nelraz tells them that about 20 years ago, a fire dragon king attacked their village looking for an elf who humiliated him. Half of their people died, and they had no idea what provoked him. An elf named Lumil then stood up and offered herself to be the victim of his wrath in exchange for sparing others. As she is not the one he is seeking, he agreed as long as she became his bride. She agreed, and they went away. However, a few years later, they found Lumil's corpse in the forest. Fearing the dragon's wrath, the elves fled their original continent for here. They think that Lumil is Ethel's mom. Melfina confirms that half-elves are only born between humans and elves. Getting on with business. It seems now that their village is being attacked by monsters whose goal is to kidnap elves. Because Gon's soldiers have failed, Kelvin's party is called. Kelvin gets permission to remodel the village. As Trison's soldiers and monsters make their way to this village, they are silently ambushed. This is thanks to Kelvin being the eye for Ethel's sniping with her godly weapon, created by Kelvin, of course. Kelvin's remodeling includes this watchtower, creating a huge earth wall around the village as well as a deadly moat. With the unit leader captured for interrogation, a soldier rushes back to camp to tell the operation leader of this failure. Even more unbelievable as he hears stories of only Syrah, Melfina, and Rion with Alex taking out all their top monsters. He then sends Gigant Lord as his final card. Melfina has Rion and Alex handle this. Doing so might earn her the right to be a full-fledged adventurer. With Kelvin's weapons and even with Gigant Lord turning into its true flaming form, don't let that intimidate you because it's all child's play for Rion. Kelvin manages to block a powerful magic attack from Clive in time. He senses he is a powerful guy. Hovering Kelvin and Ethel's location with 4 soldiers by his side, General Clive notes his excellent opinion of Ethel. Clive then demands that Ethel become his slave and tries to charm her, but Kelvin retaliates by attacking him and declaring that he won't lay a finger on his woman. Kelvin then casts an appraisal on Clive to learn his stats, and that he's also a reincarnated individual. Upset that his background has been uncovered, Clive surmises that Kelvin is a fellow reincarnated individual too. After Kelvin has Ethel retreat in stealth mode, he converts the mountain he stood upon into 4 obsidian javelins and uses them against Clive. However, Clive's helix barrier protects him from the 4 weapons attacks, and his charmed soldiers then start to attack Kelvin. In Clive's opinion, his charmed soldiers weren't dominated solely because of his charm ability, but because they're happy to serve a man as handsome as he. At that moment, Ethel breaks Clive's helix barrier with an arrow. and Kelvin is joined by the 4 golems he created. Impressed by the golems, Clive has his soldiers deal with them while he takes care of Kelvin. During his fight against Clive, Kelvin becomes aware that Clive's attacks were also hitting his soldiers, and he doesn't care as they're more soldiers than where that came from. Clive then boasts about how his cheating ability allows him to live freely without restrictions, opining that Clive is filthy, disgusting, and overall ugly because of his treatment toward others. A disgusted Clive recasts his helix barrier, and the fight continues. After their exchange, Kelvin manages to break Clive's helix barrier and scar his face. On the other hand, Clive manages to break Kelvin's staff, which he has Clotho devour. Enraged, Clive casts a Rankus spell, Tempest Barrier, causing the surrounding area to be caught up in its windy fury. So, Kelvin has Clotho bring out his Blackstaff Disaster ranked in S and has him hide. Powering up his staff, Kelvin uses it to break Clive's Tempest Barrier, and, in the process, slice a nearby mountain's top off and Clive's legs. Before Kelvin could finish Clive off, he was teleported away by General Phase, who was close by riding on a golem. Phase then introduces himself and says he's the mastermind behind the attack on the Elven village. Despite Kelvin demanding that Phase hand over Clive and his accurate deduction of the golem monster under his control, Phase rejects the demand but claims that victory was his that day. However, to Kelvin, it was a tie, and the party returned to the village to recuperate. Meanwhile, at Trison Castle, Clive is chained and cuffed onto a table and, under Phase's command, tortured by his 4 charmed soldiers as an experiment for cursed weapons. Back at the Elven village, the villagers and Kelvin's party celebrate with a banquet, and Kelvin watches atop a hill not too far from the place. Soon, he's joined by Ethel, who shows him a medallion that once belonged to her mother, and Kelvin attaches it to her hair. It's then that Ethel requests that she serve him for life, and he happily accepts. They're soon joined by the rest of Kelvin's party and a little elf girl who turns out to be Leonhardt Gon in disguise. Gon claims that Kelvin passed his S-rank exam, and his official promotion ceremony will be held in 4 days, featuring mock battles with other S-ranked people. The news excites Kelvin, and he can't wait to face off against more strong opponents.